So you come into your space, you just need to focus on you, your time, your space. That is all you need to consider for the next 75 minutes. So seated position that's comfortable for you. And as you sit here, draw your attention more to this space. So draw the attention to the space that you're in. Draw your attention into the space of yourself. And by that, what I mean is come into your body. Okay, so you might do that by noticing your breath. You might do that by noticing the felt sense as you sit on the floor, the connection with the floor. You might do that by the felt sense of your hands on your body, like literally feeling where your edges are. Come into your space, come into yourself, come into your body. Notice how you are, however that is. You might notice that you feel quite chilled. You might notice you feel quite sleepy. You might be feeling quite fatigued, lethargic, a little bit anxious. Whatever words come to you, notice how you're feeling and do your best to allow yourself to be that way. So we're never static, always feeling the same. We're never always up there or down there. So just notice how you are. It might shift as we go through the class, but also by noticing it, you can get a sense of if you need to come into the practice a bit more gentle, a bit more energetic. So if you feel quite energetic, maybe you can use that, gradually let the body wind down. Maybe if you feel quite tired, you can come into it a little bit gentler and see if the body can open up a little bit. And then take 2 or 3 bigger breaths, just by sipping a bit more air in and letting it go. Maybe as you do that, you can feel a lift in the spine, not force, not holding yourself up tense, but a bit of height. Breathing out. One last time. So we're going to take a shoulder roll, a bit of movement. And then we're going to clasp the hands together. We're going to push them out in front, open the palms, and let your breastbone soften, let your gaze come down. So into a little curl with the spine, a little fold, lovely. Maybe push your palms open. And then you're going to take the arms wide to bring them behind you and do the opposite. So up on the fingertips at the back, lift the breastbone, the gaze might come up. A bit of opening in the front of the body. And again, you might notice which of these felt the one that you naturally wanted to come to. There might be one more than the other. And then let that soften. Roll the shoulders again. So if it felt really nice to do this, there's maybe a bit more opening. If it felt nice to do that, it's maybe sinking into the more inward ones. And we're going to take our first pose. Our legs are going to come out in front of us. And we're going to take a forward fold. Okay. So to begin with, a simple forward fold. If you know that the back of your body is quite challenged, then I would say prop it up with quite a few cushions under the knees. It can be as bent as they need to be to let yourself fold over your legs. Okay. Or you might sit yourself up on a good few cushions, or a book, a block, or something like that, and come into this forward fold. So we're coming inward to begin with. If it feels that it feels too inward, you could instead keep your chest up, fold over your thighs, but have that little bit of lift in the chest. It's a bit more open. You felt like you needed just a little bit more energy in your practice. If you need that bit more inward focus, a bit quiet time, a bit reflection, a bit letting everything else pop away out to the sides and to the backgrounds, then fold over, let the head drop. And then find your steadiness here. So your steady breath. Find some stillness. Settling in and beginning to notice. So you might notice that you come into it quite gladly to come into yin and, oh, time for myself. Here we are. You can drop into yin quite easily. Might be a bit more challenging, maybe because today's been busy. Things are busy in general at the moment. The mind's active, the body's active. So never forcing yourself that you've got to be here straight away, you've got to get into the yin quickly. Just really give your body time. So you might find that the first couple of poses don't settle quite as quick. It might be a little bit more challenging. Take your time, settle, and steady the breath. It's gentle breath. Just feeling how it is to be here in your space. What you notice. Come into that place of noticing what you notice. And this is going to be our only forward fold in the practice. That might be a welcome statement from me. Maybe you really enjoy the forward fold, so we can take some choices in the other poses. You can get a little bit more inward if that's what you need as we go through the practice. If you find that you're quite happy to be a little bit more outward, a little bit more open in the front of the body, then there's some choices there in a couple of the poses also. For now, just noticing how it is to be here. Maybe using the breath to steady you. Using the out breath if you need to settle. You need to come into the calm. Slightly longer out breath or focusing on the out breath can help us get there. If you need a little bit more openness, expansion, a little bit more vibrancy, for want of a better way of thinking of it, putting it, then the in-breath can be the place where you can find that. So just because we're in yin doesn't mean it always has to be calm, relaxed. We're looking to balance. We're still in yin, in stillness and quiet. So there is that sense of me being in a quieter, calmer place. Particularly if we're prone to lethargy, overtiredness, maybe we need an in-breath every so often to give us that balance of energy. My suggestion is that you stay here for another 2 or 3 breaths. If you want to stay longer, please do. You know that's always an option. When you do come out of this pose, take your time, walk yourself up, bend the knees, you might take the cushion away if there's cushions there, and take a few windscreen wipers If you have been doing this in a different position in your back, then a few windscreen wipers lying is perfectly grand. And then taking your time, so you know where you're coming to, we're going to come to all fours next. So you might decide to come there, take a bit of cat-cow, bit of movement there, or it might be nice to just kind of settle there, feeling your hands on the floor, which can be quite grounding if that's something that you particularly need. And then from here, we're going to thread the right arm through the left and bring that right side of the head, the shoulder to the floor. I'll give you an option if this feels too much for you. So my suggestion is that you come to rest on that right shoulder with the hips up. If it feels too much on the shoulder, you can't get the side of the head down there, you can wiggle the hips back a little bit and they can still be up, but it might be easier to come to the floor. And there's the option of child's pose if you would prefer that. Okay, but if you can, just so we're coming to a different position in the spine, have the hips lifted at least a little bit. And how far forward or back they'll be, it's going to depend on just where it feels like there's a good pressure on the outside of your shoulder there. So good pressure being somewhere where you can still into it, you can find some settle, you can settle the breath and steady the breath. And you can kind of drop into that connection with the floor. And we're not going to stay here as long as 5 minutes. It's going to be about 3 minutes. You might have the left arm on the floor, which can give a little bit of support. You might enjoy instead threading that left arm behind you, which might give you a little bit more openness. It'll give you possibly a slightly more of a twist. Clearly, I'm not getting my words tonight. So just feeling where you want to be. For me, I want to bring that arm down so I can focus on the shoulder and really kind of let myself ground towards it. But notice where you are and what feels the better one for you. So if you found that it was quite nice to come into your space, to settle in, to fold inwards, and maybe you have got that left arm on the floor. If there was a sense you need a little bit more openness, outwardness, then the arm behind might be where you want to go. Just suggestions. You know me, it's always suggestions. And wherever you are, let the breath settle. A nice steady breath. If you stay here, you might notice some tension, a sense. So I sometimes realize just how much tension I'm just holding in my shoulders when I'm in this position, but I actually can't let myself just rest into the ground. If that's where you are, it's quite common. But maybe you can use the floor to soften the back of the arm, the shoulder, the top of the body in towards the floor. Allowing the hips to be lifted with some weight in the knees as well. And then we might stay on this side for just another 2 or 3 breaths, but the option to stay longer if you want to. So we will do the other side after this, and then we'll come into another pose that you might stay in shorter if you find you want more time here. When you're ready, use your left arm to press you up and come to all fours, and come back to all fours. Before we even think about the other side, come back to the center, let your hands wait. You might cat-cow, or you might instead want to bring weight off the arms, take a roll of the shoulder, or find some way to just let the arms be in a different place according to gravity. And then when you're ready, we'll do the same on the other side. So we'll thread the left arm under through the right, bringing some weight down onto that left shoulder and resting the side of the head, the left side of the head. And again, feeling where you want the hips to be. So just because they were high on the other side doesn't mean that they'll be in the same place on this side, or if they were lower. So feel where it feels that good resting on your shoulder. It might be the hips need to come back more towards a child's pose. And then again, once you find where the left shoulder can settle and where it feels right for you, a gentle check-in. Does the right arm want to open to the back of the body? There's maybe a little bit of opening of the right collarbone. Or does it prefer the support that it gives so there can be more focus onto the outside edge of the left shoulder? One's going to give a bit more twist. The other one's going to give a bit more stimulation, a bit more grounding, possibly a bit more release into the shoulder. For me tonight, it's all about the shoulder. For you, it might be that there's a sense of needing to twist, which can help open some of the breathing up in the diaphragm. But only if you can come into that twist with a steady breath. There's choices in the pose tonight, and I don't throw the choices out to overwhelm or make it complicated. Just giving options so you can be aware of what it is you need and know that there is options. But if indeed it feels like there's too many options coming at you, it feels overwhelming, then come to where I am, use that as your guide and adjust the pose from where I am. Not because I've got it right, but sometimes it can be nice to watch and follow and then find your own way, rather than listening, deciding, and trying to analyze or work out. There's a lot to be said for just do something and then feel your way from there. It's often the best strategy when we get caught in the headlights, a bit overwhelmed, too much going on. Where can you start simple and adjust from there? So taking another 2 or 3 breaths here if you want to be guided by time. When you do come out of this pose, press down onto the right arm to come back up to all fours, and again find both hands on the floor, come back to the center. Give yourself a bit of time there, where you might want to cat-cow, you might want to have a bit of a wiggle, you might want to come down to the floor, which is where our next pose is going to be, and take a bit of space, letting the hips shiggle there. That might be where you feel you want to go to. Okay, and if you're not already, when you do come down to the floor, give yourself that wiggle time, that wiggle room between. We're going to take our next pose from here. We're going to come to Sphinx, where we prop ourselves up onto the elbows. Maybe settling the pelvis into the floor, feeling the pelvis drop towards the floor. There might be a bit of heaviness to the pubic bone or the fronts of the thighs, with an opening in the front of the body. And feeling where you come to here. You might need a little prop under the ribs, which is what I'm going to do. You might need a cushion underneath the tummy if it feels too compressy on your lower back. You might want to prop your head in your hands to give it somewhere to rest. Finding a way to extend the spine. Nice. If it feels too high, you can drop the elbows forward a wee bit. And if you're enjoying the opening in the front of the body and feels like it needs a little bit more, dropping the pelvis can start, or a sense of collarbones widening. Or maybe every so often when you're here, you might want to gently press into the hands and lift the elbows. You might not stay there. You might give a little bit more lift, then drop the elbows down. Or you might really enjoy that opening, lifting, if that's what you feel you need. And noticing how it feels to be here. You might enjoy a sense of gently pressing away from the floor in the top half, while letting the lower half drop down towards the floor. If it feels like it's too tense, too much holding the upper body up, the shoulders feel too tense, then actually maybe what they need is to take a little softening of the chest towards the floor, almost feeling the shoulder blades drop towards each other. They can both be ways of releasing the shoulder, opening up a little bit more energetically, or releasing down, giving to gravity. Maybe noticing which one you need more of tonight. More stretching or more releasing. Always being guided by the steady breath. So the breath being that place that you can settle around. Often the steady breath is enough. Shape forming around it. Just really trusting your body to know where to lift from or release to or settle into around that steady breath. And suggestions, another minute here. If it becomes too much, then you might just drop the chest down, settle into a comfortable position to wait for the next pose. You can always stay here longer. You know that now, I don't need to tell you that. Notice and what you notice, where things are changing as you stay here. Things are releasing, stretching, letting go, shifting. There's probably another 2 or 3 breaths here if we're being guided by the time. A little wiggle room there for you. If there's a breath or 2 more, maybe you're already out of the pose. When you do come out of this, let yourself drop your chest towards the floor, elbows to the side, settle, take a little bit of a wiggle. And you might stay here. So our next pose is going to be in our tummy as well. So if it feels like you need to come up, curl the spine, then now might be a good time to do it. But you might be quite happy in your tummy. And there's an option if it feels like there's been too much on tummy time. So When you're ready, we're going to take a half frog. So the right knee is going to open to the side. And the left leg is going to stay lengthened. We're going to open that right knee out to the side. And then you might kind of play with how high up it comes, depending what feels like where you can settle. Okay? Depending on the flexibility of your hips. If it feels like there's too much time here on your tummy, then simply roll onto your back and we'll take this pose and the other side on your back with your knee opening out to the side, a little half butterfly instead. So a hip opener. Now you might find that you can settle quite happy onto your hands. Maybe you want your face to one side. It might feel like you're quite happy to be in your tummy, but you need to be a little bit lifted in your vision, in which case you could pop a fist on top of each other and make a little cup for your chin, make a little cup for your forehead. You might want a cushion underneath your thigh or underneath your pelvis. It might give some support that you need. Come into settle in a position where your right hip has a sense of opening. And find your steady breath. So poses where the front of the body is closed to the ground can be more yin poses. They're more introspective, more inward. So it feels too yin on the inside. It's maybe where there's a sense of needing to be on your back. A little bit more opening. It's still yin. Back of the body being grounded. A sense of the front of the body. It's got a very mild alertness to it. You can see what it is. And also feel a little, I'm going to use the word safer. If it's not so easy to let go and relax. And wherever you are, maybe you can give to gravity, either the front of the body or the back of the body. Releases towards the floor. And allowing that right hip to gently open. Some stimulation in the hip joint. Settling in. Noticing what you notice. We're all proficient gainers now. You'll all have your way of coming into notice, coming into awareness. Whether you know it or not, you all have your way of practicing. And that's that you notice the breath, or you notice the sensations, and you kind of follow them. You'll have your place that you come back to when the mind wanders. You have that practice within you. And really trusting that. Trusting your practice, your method, as unconscious as that method may be. A familiarity to how you go through your yin. That's what we do as humans. We naturally form patterns, methods, processes. We call them habits, if you like. We like the familiarity of doing that. We like to know how we do things, so we don't have to think. We just get on and do. One of the reasons I give different suggestions and options, because every so often something different might land, which might give you a little bit of newness, a little bit of difference, new stimulation, or new awareness. So trust in your process. And also being open to some new insight. You might stay here for another couple of breaths. You might already be out of half frog. You might linger longer. When you do come out of this pose, gently, gently draw the leg straight and bring it in. And then you might kind of walk it back in, wiggle the hips, and it might be nice to bend the knees, give them a bit of a windscreen wiper. If you're on your back, the knees might be in there. If you're on your tummy, the knees and feet might be in there. And then come back to legs lengthening out, come back to that kind of center place when you're ready. So come back there before we go to the other side. You might find that before you do the other side, you need to round your back, in which case you might take a little child's pose or a cat stretch. And then when you're ready, opening the left hip and coming to do the same on the other side. Okay. Do your best to come into this side as if you hadn't done the other side. So of course, you know you've done the other side. And we've been kind of soaking in the awareness of that for the last 5 minutes. I guess just not assuming it's going to be the same here. The knee might be higher, might be a little bit lower. You might need a prop on this side that you didn't on the other, vice versa. Maybe your head wants to rest slightly differently. Just noticing how you come into this side and then settling into that place that feels just right for you. Settling in. And steadying the breath here. Noticing what you notice. It's quite common when we do one side and come to the other that you still got that awareness of the sensations in the other side, which makes sense because we stimulated the fascia on that side, and our fascia is connected everywhere. In some sense, we're still lingering into the shift on the other side. Noticing what you notice here. Following the sensations, whether they come from that right side over to the left now, or it's quite obvious for you that the sensations are more on the left. Just follow the sensations. Give them time. And allow yourself to soak into the shape on this side. And again, whether you're on your tummy or if you are on your back, you let yourself really rest into the floor, give to gravity. Sense of the weight of the bones settling in. And coming back to the pose, coming back to the practice when the mind wanders. Coming back to the here and now. Remembering the mind is going to wander. It's not a bad thing that mind wanders. It's not that it shouldn't. It's what it's going to do. It would be just being aware that if it wanders back into things to do, things that are out there, and not elsewhere, then really bringing it back to the pose and noticing what there is here. Sometimes the mind wanders into the awareness, make connections, become aware of things, get new insight, which is also is kind of part of the pose, part of the practice. We're also not getting caught in analysis of that. Coming back to the pose, coming back to the shape. And through it all, there's the nice steady breaths. And there's the anchor throughout the practice. Might change in their depth, change in the rate as we move through the practice. But that sense that you can breathe steady. You might feel a bit more of the sensations on the in-breath. There's some release on the out-breath. But there's a steady breath from each shape. So you might linger here for another 3 or 4 breaths, perhaps. Just a guide. Maybe. And noticing if it feels about time to come towards the end of this particular pose, or if you need to give it longer to let things kind of gently feel their way through where it currently is. When you do come out of the pose, just gently walk that left leg back into the center. You give the hips a little shuggle and give yourself time with both legs back in the center. Even if it's just for a breath or two. And you might stay there and roll onto your back, which is where we're going to go next. Or you might want to consciously come and curl your back. There might be a moment in child's pose or a cat stretch, or lying on your back with your knees bent. Maybe there's some way that you can gently round the spine just to give it a bit of support in a different shape from where it's been. Again, just trusting where your body's telling you. You're all so good at doing that now. And come into lie on your back when you're ready though. And give yourself time to be on your back. So we are going to take the rest of our poses here, but give yourself time just to let the spine settle. Maybe take a breath or two. There's no rush. And when you're ready to come to the next pose, I'm going to show you what it is so you can come into it when you're ready. One cushion, you all know this one. We're going to take it into the middle of the back. Pelvis is off the cushion. Head's not on the cushion. So we're curling over the cushion with the arms open to the side. You might find that there's a cushion under your head. gives you a little bit of support if it feels like the head's rolling back. You're going to take a bit of opening in the front of the body here. And then feel where you want your legs to go. Okay, so mine, I think, want to just bend, knees dropping in towards each other to give a little bit of closure to balance the opening at the top. You might love opening the hips up at the same time, or you might want the legs to lengthen out and settle, which can give a little bit more opening across the tummy and into the hip flexors. So just feeling when it is that you want to be with the legs and that opening across the front of the body. Again, really trust where the lower body's telling you to settle. So knees bent, knees together. It's probably on the inner side of this pose. Knees open, feet together is more on the yang side. And legs lengthened, probably somewhere in between. You don't need to know that. It doesn't need to change the decision you've made. It might just be interesting to know that. It might make sense in some way. And nice steady breaths. Settling into them. Back of the body supported by the floor and by the cushion. Particularly letting the back of the ribs drop into that cushion. You might feel the widening at the lower ribs. Can you soften it as well? The breastbone might soften in its lift. Rather than rising itself up to the ceiling, throwing itself upwards and open, it can be open with a real steadiness and with a real confidence. Settling into the shape as it opens. And steady breaths. And this is our first pose where the back of the head resting on the floor. Really allowing the head to rest as best it can there. The sense that the face can soften. The front of the body can be open, but also soften onto the back of the body. A sense it's open, but it's not on. It's on, it's aware, but not having to present itself. Open simply for the experience of opening. A gentle stretch. Not having to perform, put on a posture, put on a face, put on an energy. It's simply there. Gently open, quietly open. Suggestions about another minute here. You might find that you quite welcome that extra time. It does feel like it's just slightly too open. You can always take the cushion away and lie in the position without the cushion to give it a little bit, be more softening if it needs that. Maybe the tummy can soften. Even if there's a gentle stretch on it, the soft tissue can settle and soften onto the back of the body. You might want to stay here for longer. It might be another couple of breaths. It's feeling your way with when might be the right time for you to come out of this pose. When you do come out, if the knees are open, then bring them back in. If they're together, maybe open them slightly, or bend the knees if the legs are stretched. Then you're going to roll to one side, take the cushion away, and then come back onto your back again, just to allow the spine to feel its natural curve, supported by the floor. Maybe take a few breaths there. And then feeling if there's movement you want to make. Maybe a stretch of the legs or a hug of the knees, or a circle of the arms. Feeling where there can be some movement which can kind of just shift the sensation around the whole of the body. And we're going to stay on our back for the next pose. When you're ready, you're going to lengthen the legs out one at a time. And give yourself at least a breath just to let them settle there. And then we'll come into half moon. So we'll open the right side of the body first by taking a left foot more out to the left. The right will follow. Maybe settle your hips. And then shuggle the shoulders over to the left to open out that right side. Okay. And I'm feeling where the arms want to go. So maybe that right arm just naturally opens and welcomes reaching more through that right side. Maybe it's quite happy to be on the chest. And the left arm as well might want to reach up or settle onto the body. So coming into your half bend. And doing your best to feel your awareness all the way through the whole of that right side. So I know for me, I often come into the ribs, into the side of the arm, and that's where more of my awareness naturally is. So I might bring a casual glance to the side of my hip, the side of my thigh, just to notice if there might be some sensation needed there, maybe a softening of where I naturally come into my awareness. And then follow the sensations. Noticing what you notice. It's settling into the shape. You might find that actually you want to cross an ankle over. There might be a need to tuck a little top, a little layer underneath the lower back. Maybe letting the ribs soften, particularly the lower ribs at the back, the curve of the spine is, or the lower ribs at the front, where the lift of the diaphragm is. Wherever you are, settling into the shape. Noticing what you notice. Nice steady breath. And a breath where you can feel the rise of the breath, the lift of the breath, and the fall of the breath, the lowering of the breath, and the out breath. Feeling both ends of the breath, the top of the breath, the bottom of the breath. All the time, a nice steady breath. And there's maybe a casual glance of awareness to the face. Letting it relax if you're aware that it's become tense or it's crept into the expression. It just doesn't feel where it naturally wants to settle. We notice our expression. Sometimes we might notice how we are. Quite often notice my face and realize I'm in thinking brain. I'm trying to work something out. Or there might be a sense of a habitual smile which you tend to put on, show to the world. Really let your face settle, however it settles here. And completely who you are and how you are. There might be the odd wiggle as we stay here, either to find a little bit more sensation if it ebbs away, or to ease out any sensations that creep in as tension, unhelpful tension. You might take another minute here on this side. Do come out and pose earlier. It's finding somewhere where you can be comfortable. Maybe some really gentle movement. Another couple of breaths might take you towards the end of your time in this pose. Taking you to around the 5 minutes. Maybe it's a few more. When you come out of this side, come gently, bringing the arm down if it's overhead, and the arms, shuggling the shoulders back first, and then letting the legs follow. Give yourself time in the center. Be a breath, and then feeling if there's movement you want to make before we do the other side. Maybe some windscreen wipers or a little bit of movement through the arms. Really letting it just gently move through the whole of the body. Feeling all the connective tissue and settling after that side. And then when you're ready, coming into that pose on the other side. So the right foot's going to open to the side, the left will follow. Settling the hips and then shuggling the shoulders to the right. So gradually you're opening the left side of the body. And just give yourself time, there's no rush to get into it. And feeling where the arms may or may not want to go. And also noticing if you're quick to demand the top side or the bottom side of this half to stretch into it. Maybe just feeling the whole of the side connecting. It might be across of the ankles. Or not. We come into half bend, opening the left side of the body. Again, do your best to come as if you didn't know you'd done the other side. You might still feel the sensations on the other side, the shadows of where it's just been. Or you might be really aware of the left side. Wherever you notice sensations, follow them. Use them as a guide to come back to the pose when the mind wanders. Nice steady breath. Back of the body settling. The front of the body settle. And maybe noticing if the face has crept into habitual expression. Doesn't feel where actually it wants to rest. With that steady breath, you might notice the rise and lift of the breath on the inhale and the drop and fall of the breath on the outhale. And the ends of the breath, the upper end and the lower end of the breath. Body finding the breath. Always finding its breath. Noticing what you notice and feeling what you feel. Maybe noticing if there's tension creeping into the feet or the hands. Maybe it's not crept in, maybe it's been lingering there. A casual glance. And coming back to the main body of the shape. You can be in the core of the pose. And the main attention is drawn to. You can every so often glance to the periphery. just to notice. And sometimes there that maybe the letting go of the hands, the fingers, the clench of a foot can actually change the center of the pose, the feel of the pose, the connection of the pose. Coming towards the end of our time in this side. It might be another 2, 3, maybe 4 breaths. And you might feel it's time now to come out of it. Just gradually again, the arms are up, bring them down first. Shiggle the shoulders to the center, let them settle, and then bring the lower half back to the center. And always come back to that place of center. It's for a breath, a moment, before then making some moves, if there's moves to be had. Sometimes simply coming back to the center and taking a few breaths is enough to feel kind of the fascia shift, rebalance, rebound. If there is some movement, let yourself take those movements. We have one more pose before Shavasana. So I have to admit, it is my pose of the moment at the end. It's no coincidence I'm putting it at the end. So a cushion, maybe 2 cushions, maybe the cushion folds underneath the hips to lift the hips above the breastbone, lifting the hips above the heart. It's lifting the pelvis above the diaphragm and let the diaphragm release. Keeping your feet on the floor, your knees bent. Also to let some of the deep hip flexors release out. And come in here for at least a couple of breaths. You might stay here. This might be where you want to stay. It's usually where I want to come at the end of the practice. If you feel you need more sensation, you need more stretch, a little bit more opening, you might lengthen one leg out. You might lengthen the arm on that side overhead. Okay, so there's an option there to open out through one side. And I'm suggesting doing that rather than lengthening both legs out, because it can also access one of the deep hip flexors, which can be quite tricky to reach. Arm overhead, leg lengthened might help you find that. You might simply enjoy both knees being bent, hips lifted, and the sense of release that comes with that. A release through the diaphragm, through some of the hip flexors, through the hip sockets. Just really choosing what feels the one for you. And if you are opened with one leg, one arm, and I'll let you know when we might change that over to the other side. It doesn't need to be a perfect exact science of exactly the same time on one side or the other. Kind of trust that if you do need to linger longer on one side, it all balances out in the end. Notice and what you notice here. Again, can you let where you've got contact with the back of the body on the floor, can you really let it settle into there? Giving it to gravity, not trying to hold the breastbone up. The shape being enough to hold the breastbone up. Support the cushion and the shape. If you have one leg lengthened, one arm lengthened, gently bring them back in. If you want to keep it roughly one side the same as the other, time-wise. Give it a moment back in the centre again. Notice how they resettle. And then you might want to lengthen the other leg out and the other arm. Just checking if you're doing that the hips settle back onto the cushion, the back of the ribs where they've already got contact with the floor settle into the floor. Might be a sense of weight into the shoulder blades. Weight into the back of the head, the back of the skull. Nice steady breaths. You can feel nice sometimes here to really let the out breath go. Almost drop away, fall away. And then breath will happen quite naturally. So the reason I'm putting this one at the end is because it's a really nice way of relaxing that diaphragm. It gives a really nice wind down at the end of the day. Preparing ourselves for the wind down, preparing ourselves for bed, even if it's still a while before you go to bed. Letting ourselves come towards that place. It is now getting darker at this time. You probably notice it in the room you're in. The light changing. We're following that natural change in the light. Naturally coming to a more yin time. We are heading towards that autumn equinox. The next class will be an autumn equinox special, where the daytime and the nighttime are exactly the same. And shift coming into yin time of the year. We're not quite there yet. If your legs lengthened out, the arms lengthened out, you might gradually bring them back in, placing the foot on the floor, letting the arms rest. And we'll take a couple of breaths more here. And then when you're ready, whenever that is, gently lifting the hips, taking the cushion or cushions away, popping them to the side, and letting them come back down to the floor. Give yourself time there. Might be nice to take a few windscreen wipers, stretch out, or there might be something else that feels a much more obvious movement for you. So any way you can kind of move through that rebound. And then find your way whenever you're ready to somewhere that you can enjoy for the last few minutes of your practice. So it might be just resting on your back. Legs might be lengthened. You might pop a cushion underneath the knees. Might get a blanket, you might pop the lights off or put a lamp on. Needing a bit light as it comes that wee bit darker. Somewhere where you can really come to a place of doing even less, wherever that might be. Once you get there, there might be 2 or 3 breaths to help you settle in. And then enjoying this quiet, even more still time where I will be quiet. And I'll meet you back here in a few minutes where we can complete the practice together. body's telling you to stay here for longer, and listen to that and stay for longer. There's a sense that you might want to come towards the end of the practice and some gentle movement. Just feeling your way, finding your way gradually to a seated position. Go at your own pace and go in your own way. Whenever you do come to sit, give yourself time to be upright. Give your system time to be upright. Maybe not so much an awakening of where you are, but just gently maybe bringing just that little bit more awareness of what's outside. So what I mean by that is what's in the rest of the room. Maybe hearing some of the sounds that are a bit further away. So letting your body know that the yin practice is coming to an end. It's not such a shock when we do come out of this little bubble. And a bit of movement, a roll of the shoulders can help us. The body towards the end, there might be a little shake out of the wrists, or a wiggle of the fingers, a wiggle of the ribs. And then come into place your hands to your heart center when you're ready. That really important bit that completes the practice, that is that thank you to yourself for making the time, making the space, and listening in and finding your awareness. And it lets me thank you, which is always important because I always want to thank you for being you. So thank you for being you. Namaste.